What is up, everybody? Welcome to the first in a series of videos we'll be doing on outplaying our opponents. And this is more of a podcasty vibe. Haven't done something like this in a while, so I hope you guys like it. But I wanted to make this because I think it can be difficult for people to improve sometimes when you sort of don't know what you're missing. And sometimes just having another framework or principle through which you can view the game can help you to make that improvement that you're looking for. Because a lot of educational material is kind of based around copying others or do this or do that, but not allowing you to understand the principles that are underneath all of it. And if you have a firm grasp of those principles, you'll be able to just apply them in dynamic scenarios yourself. And you'll be able to be better at analyzing what's going on so you can problem solve to have better outcomes in the matches you're playing, as well as being able to grow faster as a player. So that's the gist, that's the pitch, I suppose, as to why I'm doing this and why it might be helpful for you. Now, today, I wanted to talk about risk and respect. Two R's, the R words. And the reason why I think this one is a fun one to start with is because everything is risk. Everything is risk. And even though I use the word respect, I suppose more colloquially, it will be more intuitive and make more sense to you. But in, I suppose, more game theoretic terms, maybe a word like credibility might make more sense, but we'll get into it. And so I don't lose you immediately, I'll use a quick example. And we're going to start off with the micro, and then later we're going to go to the macro ways of thinking about these ideas. Because generally speaking, we can always split esports up, any team-based esports up into those two ideas, largely speaking. So let's look at a situation where I throw down a smoke on a choke point. If my opponent decides to not push the smoke, one might say that he respects the smoke. And then if he runs through it, one might say that he disrespects the smoke or the utility. And we all know how powerful it can be to show the capacity to disrespect utility. And we're going to really begin to understand why that's the case as we discuss this idea throughout this video. So that's the basic idea. Everything carries risk. So if I go through the smoke as a T player, that's a pretty risky play because I'm going to be at a disadvantage as I come through the smoke. And if a CT is holding it, my chances to kill him are very low compared to his chances to kill me, which will be very high. Now, if it's the case that I just respect the smoke and the CT knows that I'm going to be doing that like 95+% of the time, there's actually an advantage there for him because he knows that when he throws that smoke down, it's very likely that I'm never pushing it. So he can then go and help his teammates do something else of value around the map, which gives them more resources somewhere else. And it's kind of like having almost an extra player. And so that's one of the reasons why you need to show the capacity to push the smoke every so often or to have plays around it, even if that's just to throw a lurk smoke in front of it, or have a flash there as well, just to make sure that you're keeping that player's attention on that particular position. So he respects that you might do it. So this is why it's important to understand this particular dynamic, because if you always show the same thing, it allows that player to easily profile you. And this is a big point that is another theme here, risk profiling. Now, this is something I'm going to go to poker right now, and apologies to those of you that are not familiar with poker, but you should still, I think, understand. So pre-flop in a game of poker, and in general, we want to understand in the game of poker what the kind of risk profile, what the style of play is of each player at the table. There might be a player that plays the top 50% of hands, which 50% of hands, that's a lot of hands. He could be, getting into a hand with absolute garbage, or he could be playing a really strong hand. You just have no idea. Now, the other player on the other end of the spectrum could be playing really conservatively, really tight, have a really tight range of hands he'll play. Maybe it's just a top 5%. So that means if there's action from that player, let's say he does a 3-bet early on or something like that in pre-flop, he probably has something really strong. He's representing something strong, and his style of play is so tight that we should easily understand sort of what that means in terms of his approach to the game. Now, the other player, again, they may have absolute trash. So just by knowing that, it allows you to understand how they're reacting to certain decisions. It makes sense now that they're trying to get into every single hand. They just want to see action. That's part of their strategy, is they want to get into every hand. They want to try to bluff you. They want to try to mess with you and try to pretend that they have something with their betting patterns, represent something stronger than they actually have. And so that's one of the reasons why some people like to play that particular way of playing because they just like to be more aggressive in their style. So understanding what we're dealing with is really important because it dictates for us how we understand the action that's happening, and also it understands how they will react to what we're doing. Super important to understand. This is why, for example, as you are playing a round by round in a game of Counter-Strike, just again talking about the micro here to begin with, you'll want to try to understand what is the player you're up against, because there are lots of spots, for example, where if you're seeing a T side defaulting, you're going to have that guy. Let's say we're the CTs. We're playing on, we're the anchor on the A site of Mirage or something. There's going to be that guy that's playing T-Ramp a lot of the time in the default. Maybe he's playing Palace sometimes. But his overall role there in the default is to try to harass, create space, maybe get a pick onto you. So what he's trying to do there is outplay you. And what you're trying to do is outplay him. And so to do that, we need to understand what are the types of ways he will react to what we do. And what's important there is by understanding him more, we'll know, okay, well, should we just throw the util straight away? Do we do that? Do we do that to condition him to expect it and force him to have a slower pace if we're worried about him having a faster pace? Or do we want to have an advantage and say, you know what, I'm going to risk it. I'm going to say he's not going to just try to run up and one tap me. He's not going to try to take space quickly. He's not going to have a teammate with him that's going to try to trade it out. And I'm just going to leave that position open. I'm not going to throw any util because I want to hold on to it. I don't want to just give away this value for free. I want it to actually accomplish something. And so that's an important decision you have to make as well. And all of these things are decisions because, anything in a competitive game is about getting the advantage. If you can stack up more advantages than your opponent, then you will likely win the game. So that's the name of the game, is advantages and disadvantages. If you have disadvantages, how can you mitigate those and make it a little bit easier to deal with and get back into the game, get back into a place of advantage? If you have advantages, how do you close out the game? And so these are the things we have to think about. And this is why the risk profiling is really important, because it teaches us how to play against our opponents and how not to make mistakes against them and how to understand what to expect from them. And it also teaches us that what's really powerful is to be unable for them to profile us, for us to not really fit into any box and be unpredictable. And then they don't know how to read us. And then that is kind of uncomfortable because we could be playing any position, any timing, any approach, and they don't know what to do at that point. And that's a very powerful position if you can create that reality. So that's how it works in the micro. And this is where the respect idea comes in as well. Because if you can kind of pin someone, like, oh, this is just to like a particular risk profile, because everybody has a level of risk that they're comfortable with and that they like to play. Some players are definitely safer than others, and some players are going to run it down. I am one of those people. I do like to mix it up because it's more correct and everything, but generally I have a high degree of risk tolerance, and it's one of the reasons why if I play the game, a position I would be playing in Counter-Strike is more of an entry role, because I like the high risk scenarios. It feels comfortable for me and it feels more fun and intuitive for me than the other scenarios that are a little bit slower paced. And this is one of the interesting things, by the way, of understanding the overall complexion of your team in terms of styles, so that you can more effectively know what are the correct strategies that your team's going to be able to play in a given situation. So these are the micro things we need to consider. So that's something that I'll first of all, my takeaways to you will be, how well can you pin down the behavior of your opponents and categorize it so that you can start to make guesses. Because the cool thing about this is that if you can start to do that, you can start to take the initiative in ways that make sense. Not just random, I'm just going to push this position because. You're going to say, hey, this guy plays really, really passive. So I know I can probably push down T-Rap and take a pretty deep position. He might be holding for that push, but if I get a teammate to pop flash over the top, now I have this position. Or, I know that the guy likes to put the AWP there for a pick. I can get a teammate to set up with me to make a play. So just by understanding these tendencies, the risk profiles, what the timings might be, and what they like to do, you can start to outplay them. If we don't have that information, we're just throwing stuff against the wall, and that's not going to be as consistent. And another really easy, profile that everybody's familiar with is that guy that no matter what loves to late lurk. Just late lurk, just all he will do. At the latest possible timing, he's going to try to catch you rotating off the site. His teammates have planted. They're maybe losing the round on the other side. He's still going to late lurk. So like what he's going to do. So we've all run into that example, I think, at one time or another. So that's the examples of this from the micro point of view. So it's one thing to understand the risk of a play, but then the other thing is to understand whether or not that person on the other end cares because their risk tolerance is high or lower. And then this is how we begin to profile them. So if we look at things from a more macro point of view, we can also start to consider some more complex scenarios in terms of risk and respect. So a very obvious example for something like this is that sometimes you have to create a high risk by having something in your default. Let's say a banana opening from the CT side might be really strong. They have 3 players there. They have really good util set. They're always seemingly able to take away that deep banana control from you, and you just don't seem to have the right answer for it. Now, this is a situation where if they do that a few rounds in a row, you're going to start to be more fearful because you don't have a good answer. It is inherently high risk to challenge it because what they have is better than what you have. So by understanding that's high risk, just because you're dying and losing and like not able to navigate it, you'll start to think, okay, I should probably do something else. And so now the CTs have conditioned their opponents to fear that opening, and they have found out that there's no good response that they have for it, at least yet. And so the CTs can now start to understand that they've conditioned their opponents, and their opponents are going to be herded to a different opening. Well, they're now going to start off, instead of putting any emphasis on bananas at the start of the round, they may say, we're going to go top mid, the top mid take first, the apartments take first, and then do banana later. So now the CTs can, use any util tricks that they want to represent that they're doing the same opening on banana, but at the same time, they have a 4 stack ready to go at top mid at the right timing to just completely destroy what the Ts are trying to do. And at that point, it feels like they've got 10 players everywhere on the map. Doesn't matter where you go. And so that's the feeling I think we've all felt at various times, where the other team's able to make really good guesses as to what we're going to do because they have set up the conditioning. They've created a really high risk situation. Our risk tolerance isn't such that we're going to be, as a team, just deciding to just run through it anyway. And there's also reasons for that, but we won't go deeper into why that might be the case. So now let's look at like a different scenario. So let's look at a scenario like, because that's just the basic macro conditioning that is very prevalent and well understood, I think, in Counter-Strike. So if we look at a situation like, let's say the opponents, we're profiling them a little bit when we see that this is a team that likes to swing. They like to swing top mid. They send 3 players swinging top mid and sack. They're going to just swing it dry. They don't even care. The smoke's not popping yet. They're swinging into the AWP. They don't care. And that's all well and good. But you actually, against a team that's aggressive like that, they are playing a style that they want to play. That is the risk profile that they like, because they love to have the gunfights. They want to have the 50-50s. They want to have the 30-70s. They don't care. High risk players. Now, what sucks, the worst possible thing for you, if you're like posted up on window, you're like, okay, salivating, they're going to swing you, is if you are missing your shots. And the reason that sucks is because now there's another element that comes in here, which is that they have, let's say, by you missing your shots and potentially even dying to them swinging, you're reinforcing that their style, their approach actually works, and they're going to be taking initiative with doing that style in the first place. They're getting the pick. It's working for them. So they're going to get a boost of confidence. And against aggressive players, that is a very scary situation to be in, because you're going to be losing confidence. You'll start to be a bit more fearful of making that same choice, because it feels as you start to lose like gunfights in certain positions, it starts to feel more risky because you're feeling evidence that they have an edge there. Even if you start out and it seems 50-50, if they keep winning that gunfight, the confidence edge goes to them, and that actually is a thing. And so, you're in a tricky situation, because if you allow them to just play out their style of play, then they are going to have the advantage. They're taking the initiative. They're feeling good. You're playing their game now. You're reacting to them now. And that is inherently disadvantageous. So there's 2 options. Option number one is to say, fuck it, and just try to challenge them even harder and try to shut down their stylistic approach and say, no, I'm not going to allow you guys to have the initiative. I'm not prepared to let that happen. I'm not prepared to let you feel like you can dominate us with aggression, which is my preferred response, because I don't like the other team to feel comfortable that they can get the opening that they want. That's just my general preference. There is, and so, one typical kind of minimum effective dose here is playing a 1-3-1 as on Mirage and getting 3 CTs into an aggressive setup, like jumping out the window, going out connector, having the support of util, maybe from the B cat, the B player that's, instead of playing apps, is playing in cat or whatever it might be, so that you can shut that timing down and kind of stick it to them. If that fails, or if it's the case that you, let's say, have players that aren't as comfortable with that, you're going to have to take the L, right? You're going to have to take the L. But if you do shut it down, you're essentially, the ball is now in your court, and they are now the ones that are having to respect the fact that you guys can shut down their mid takes. So now they're going to be a bit fearful of that, and they're going to have to try to figure something else out. So you're taking the initiative back, which is why I prefer that style. So the other alternative is that if you're not super confident doing that, or you did it and it failed, is now we're thinking about, okay, well, we're giving up something. We're giving up mid control. We're giving up the initiative. But is there another way that we can take the initiative? Because there's always a way that you can take the initiative. And you'll see this when you watch pro teams and players, even in tricky spots, you'll see that they'll try to create something. And that's really important, because the act of creating a play is inherently disruptive, and it can carry the element of surprise. There's a lot of things that can happen there that can go in favor of the team that is taking initiative. And so it's very important to find it if you can. And so again, you'll see it with teams, pro teams, where they'll be communicating amongst each other in these 3v3s, 4v4 situations where they're, okay, let's pop flash this, let's move over here, let's clear over this, like this position, let's take that space, let's do something, find an advantage. So what you could do is you could say, all right, we're not going to challenge mid, that didn't work. What we're going to instead do is play for retake. And the reason why you might want to do that is because you're just basically saying, look, this team wants to get all these positions with aggression. We are just going to let them have it, but they still have to win the round by detonating the bomb, getting the bomb to go off. So to do that, they're going to need to defend a post plant. And to do that, they need post plant positions. So, this is a very typical thing you'll see CTs do, which, like, let's say Dust 2 is a really good example of this, where, you've got the 2 players on the site, and they're like, okay, there's a B split. They know it's coming. And so what they might try to do is say, look, we can't hold the site, so we're just going to attack into the upper tunnels and take out those Ts, however many there might be, because usually there's going to be more going through mid. There's very often is the case. Depends on the meta, but usually that's the case in the team. But you're going to gamble that, because if you do that, you then manage to take away the post-plant position. You're setting your team up for the future for when they're going to retake by hindering the opponent's ability to play more positions post-plant, which is very difficult then for the Ts. If they're only able to play on site and you already have players in position like that, it's really strong. And on Mirage and the A site, let's say, taking T-Ramp, taking Palace away, these types of things can be really, really strong. So you've essentially said, look, if we try to just fight you and play into your execution going through connector and the rest of it, you smoked off a guy on jungle, a CT in jungle, the site players isolated. These are super high risk situations for you to try to just fight them. So instead, we want to figure out, is there another way that we can win the round that's higher percentage for us, that has a better risk profile for us, or is stylistically better for us? Or do we want to just play into the strengths of what they're doing? And that's what the name of the game is. It's about assessing the degree of advantage or disadvantage, and then understanding how to pick the best option. And so, respecting them 4v1ing you, I think is pretty fair. Respecting that and saying, look, I don't want to take any part of that. I'm not going to disrespect it and just run into it and die like a fool. And so instead, I'm going to try to find another way to play this scenario. And so that's kind of what that kind of could look like from a more macro point of view. So this is I suppose a quick little explanation of looking at the game through risk, looking at the game through the behavior, the risk profile of the opponent. If I do something, if they have to take a high risk, do they do it? Do they actually care? Yeah, there's going to be players that are going to be really high skilled that love to be in those scrappy, high risk situations, and that's where they perform the best. That's gonna be the case. That's like where some of the best plays come from at the pro level, and that's some of the things that we remember the most as fans of the game when we're watching. Players will do that. It's not because they're stupid or playing incorrectly. It's because that's how they want to play the game. And rather than try to assume that everyone should play the game in the way that you think they should, understand that they are going to play the game with the style that is comfortable for them. And the sooner you understand what it is, the more effectively you'll be able to outplay them, because you know what kind of fight they want to take. You know what kind of thing they're looking for, and then you can deny it. I'll give you guys a really quick tidbit here from it's more recent days when I was competing in Quake Live, but it was like in 2016 or something. I was playing against a player on one of his, maybe his best map, one of his best maps. And he was a player that was extraordinarily mechanically dominant, like one of the best mechanical players in the game. And I was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to win if I just try to fight this guy and play his game and fight him just out of mechanics. And so I instead had a different strategy where I was like, okay, I'm just going to, every time I think he wants to fight, I'm just not going to fight. And so, I get into this situation where he started to make mistakes because he kept looking for things and I wasn't giving it to him. And that happened over and over and over again. And he started to get uncomfortable. And because he was unable to play his style and he wasn't able to get comfortable, he then started to make mistakes, which I was then looking for and I could punish. And obviously I was hitting pretty well myself at that time, but still, it is a very important distinction to make, that certain players will look for certain things, and if you figure that out and you can deny it, you can outplay them, and it's very effective. So with that said, I hope this was informative, and I hope that from both the micro and the macro point of view, you can kind of look at the game a little bit differently to kind of figure out, am I too predictable? Am I actually paying attention to the types of plays my opponents are making? Am I being conditioned? What are my opponents trying to look for with the style of play? Do they like to play fast? Do they like to play defensive? How can I exploit that? If they're playing really defensively, they're giving me space to take for free. They're playing really aggressively, they're taking higher risks in terms of, if we're able to find where the weakness is in the aggression and we're able to get that early fight, then we're going to get an edge really quickly, because there's always openings. So I'll tell you guys one last little tidbit here from the fight that I learned from the fighting game community when I was really, really deep into playing fighting games and trying to get good at it. One of the most important things that I learned in my time there was that one of the really cool fundamentals that you're always looking at is, when an opponent makes a mistake, am I applying the maximum punish? Like, do I even know what the maximum punish is? So, and always getting in that maximum punish when I see the mistake. So that's really important, because to see the mistake, you have to produce an environment in which the opponent will make a mistake. You have to have a good defense. You have to have good positioning. You have to create a scenario where they're trying to get at you, but then they take a swing and it's a miss, and now they've got a whiff, and you're in a spot where you can punish them. And how good is your punish? I don't know how well that applies specifically to Counter-Strike. It's a bit more abstract, but I do think it's an important thing to understand, is being in position to actually punish your opponent's mistakes reliably is an important thing to consider. And that's another way you can kind of look at the game when you're playing, and you can look at the positions that you play, or the timings, or the utility that you use, the angles, and all the rest of it. So, okay, that is truly the final thought. Thank you guys for listening to this. I hope that this more kind of podcasty, more theoretical talk was actually interesting and valuable to you guys. Let me know in the comments below. There will be more.